So I want to talk about perfect gears on a folding bike. And, perfect is different from every person on the planet. So since I'm making the video, right, I'm going to talk about what I think is perfect for, the majority of customers, actually. It's not for myself. I'm not talking about me, but I am using myself as the rationale to justify what is best for most. And what it comes down to, is you need a gear that you can climb hills on, like legitimate hills. So if you have, quote unquote granny gear that's too tall, you can't climb. The bike becomes just horrible, because you have to walk it up a hill and it's just weird. So, part of the deal is you really have to be able to climb hills with the gears. And so that's number one. But it is a little bit different with folding bikes because they're more efficient at a slower rate of speed. So it's actually easier to climb. So the gear that you can use to climb on a folding bike is actually a little bit taller than it would be on a standard bike, as it turns out. And it goes the other way when you're descending, like essentially it's less efficient when you're descending. So you're not going to be able to get as much speed, but that's okay, right? You can always coast downhill. So the way I've assessed this over the years is that I can climb any mountain, in my opinion, with a 28 tooth gear inch. So that gear will allow me. It's hard, it's not easy, but I can do it. And so therefore, I think most people can climb most hills with a 28 gear inch low gear on a folding bike, right? And so that's where I usually set my gears on almost all the bikes. I'll be honest with you, we had some issues over the years with some bikes, and I couldn't get anything above a 22 gear inch on the low gear. And I found it completely useless. Like literally, it was just so low. I tried to use it and I couldn't use it. Now I do know honestly, I have customers that go down that low. I know customers who've actually modified a 28 gear inch to 22 and stuff, and that's fine. I think it's a very small percentage of customers that go down there, but I do have customers that go down to like 25, 26 gear inch for their low gear. And I think that's very logical depending on the environment you're in. If you have like very, very serious climbing to do, I think that's probably actually a really good idea for some people. But for the majority of the population, I'm going to stick with my assessment at 28 is a low gear. 20 gear inches is a good place for the majority of the population because, you can't make it for everybody. You have to make it for, I guess what most people need, right? And people who need a little bit more can make some modifications, but ideally we don't want a lot of people modifying the gears because that's ridiculous. I mean, why buy a bike that you have to modify? And it turns out, from my understanding, most people do not modify our gears. A small percentage do. So I think we've done okay. And as far as the high gear, so the answer changes depending on the bike we use, the 11 speed, the 8 speed internal hub, the 10 speed, regular drivetrain. But generally it's rough, it's over 300% gear range from low to high on everything. So generally our high gear is going to be in the ballpark of 90 gear inches, for most of our bikes. I mean, obviously the 11 speed goes 400%, so it's quite a lot higher than that. That's an anomaly, right? And over time, that is something that I want to extend. That's something I'm focusing on to get a nice wider gear range. I mean, the deal is that with the high gear, so once you set the low gear that the bike is usable in hills, then you can figure out exactly how fast you can go without spinning out. And generally our bikes go a bit over 20 miles per hour. You can pedal it through over 20. And that is something that I'm working on, long term. I'm going to be trying to add a little bit more on the top end. And obviously, I'm not interested, you can actually add to the top end by increasing the bottom end. We're not going to be doing that. I like the bottom perfectly well. So I'm looking at, ways to just extend the width of the range, and that doesn't mean more gears. I'm not a fan of more gears. Like, honestly, I think just 4 or 5 gears is sufficient. If you can get a quality drivetrain with that many gears, you can't. The reason we add gears, honestly, is the quality of the drivetrains is just so much better. I mean, 7-speed is generally very low quality freewheel drivetrains. Wherever you go, whatever you buy, it's going to be junk. So freewheel is low end. 8-speed is a cassette usually. I've not seen an 8-speed freewheel. They might exist, but I don't think so. And so it's obviously much higher quality than anything, pre 7-speed or lower. And the 9-speed stuff is actually really nice. It's a lot better than the 8-speed stuff that's in the market. And it's not because of the extra gear. The extra gear is irrelevant. And the 10-speed stuff, I have to tell you, is really nice. I mean, and it's not because of the extra gear. If anything, I would prefer not as many gears. I prefer less gears, but equally spaced, right? Equally spaced. So, you have them when you need them. Generally, I don't, I'm not doing touring. I think you need a lot of gears when you're touring and stuff like that. I'm not doing any of that. And, the environments I'm riding in, I honestly don't need hardly any gears, hardly any. So, I'm not a big fan. The problem when you add so many gears is the chain gets really narrow, right? So you get a hyper narrow chain. And so the chain's not going to last as long. I mean, nothing's going to last as long. And so if you have, wider chain, like 8-speed, or let's say, let's make pretend, right? Just making pretend that you have 4-speed or 1-speed is great because you have super wide chain. Everything's going to last so much longer. You're not going to have to worry about maintenance or anything like that. And if that's all the gears you need and it gives you the width that's necessary, I think that's actually ideal, right? Unfortunately, it turns out that, as you have less gears, you have much lower quality drivetrains, dramatically lower quality. I would actually, generally 7-speed is considered junk because it's a freewheel. I mean, that's what the industry classifies it as. And if you're going to go with anything lower than 7-speed, it's like extreme junk. Because Shimano makes 7-speed, but if you go with like a 6-speed, or I think they still make 5-speed freewheels. I'm not sure about that. Any of these weird brands like Falcon and stuff that I've never really heard of. I just see them in wholesaler catalogs. Generally, extremely secondary brands, like that no one's ever touched unless a customer really needs it. They order for a cut. No one's going to have that in their store. It's really weird stuff. But I remember the name Falcon because they make the worst stuff that is available. Yeah, so generally, I think more gears is nice because of the quality of the componentry. The shifters are just so much better on 10-speed versus the 9-speed, and the rear derailleurs, really good. I mean, really good. And they allow for more upgradability because we're using mid-cage derailleurs now, which means they don't get as low to the ground. So you can put bigger cassettes on them. It's actually really important. And the bigger cassette gives you a wider gear range. So it's really, really nice stuff. But yeah, I think that's, pretty much the spiel on drivetrains. I think 28 gear inches is a good place to begin. And then, you get your, roughly 3-time multiple. It's actually a little bit more for your high gear. And if you can handle a higher low gear, then you can get a higher high gear, right? Most people, I think, shouldn't do that. And I think the only people that should or modify the gears are the ones that need like a 25 or 26 gear inch low gear. And a gear inch calculator can be found at sheldonbrown.com. It's a wonderful website. I love sheldonbrown.com. I love Sheldon Brown. He passed away, rest in peace. One of the most awesome individuals I've had the pleasure of interacting with in my life, actually. Extremely knowledgeable, extremely generous, extremely good, honest, just wonderful person. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it.